I grew up on a hop farm in Granger, just down the valley here. And in doing so, my family still farms down there. They still grow hops. And as Barbara mentioned, I left the farm a few years ago to take a position in management at Yakima Chief. My great grandfather, Charles Carpenter, he planted the first hops in the Yakima Valley back in the late 1860s, about 3 miles that direction. If you know where the Autanum Youth Park is, that's where the original homestead was. And then my grandfather moved the farm down to the lower valley. There's been a lot of changes over the years, and I think those changes in the hop industry have really taken on an exponential rate of change the last 30 years. There wasn't a lot of trust and transparency in the hop industry back in the 1980s. And as an example, there was the Department of Justice, on behalf of a group of hop growers, brought an antitrust lawsuit alleging price fixing and collusion against some of the major hop dealers of the era back in those days. And then on the heels of that lawsuit, based in part on what was learned, Anheuser-Busch, the largest brewer in the world at that time, followed up with a suit against the same major hop dealers alleging the same thing. So you can see it wasn't an environment for creating a lot of trust and transparency. Now, a couple things happened in the late 1980s that I think in hindsight ushered in a new period of hope for transparency in the hop industry. One of the things that happened was Anheuser-Busch decided to secure at least part of their hop supply by contracting directly with hop growers. Now this changed the role of the dealer a little bit, because all of a sudden, instead of relying on profit coming from buy-sell margins, they became a service provider for Anheuser-Busch, providing handling services, storage services, and processing for Anheuser-Busch. For us as growers, this was a wonderful development, because for the first time, we were able to sit down not just with a brewer, but the world's largest brewer, and communicate with them. We learned what they wanted in terms of quality, and they learned from us the economics of that quality. It was a welcome development for my family, and so we took all of that business that we could. And that consisted primarily in those days of aroma hops, early maturing hops, varieties like Willamette, U.S. Tettnang, and Cascade were three of the varieties they were interested in. Unfortunately for us as growers, it took a big chunk of that business. We still had late maturing alpha hops that we needed to sell. And the dealers at the time weren't quite as anxious to buy hops from us, because we had buddied up with the biggest brewer in the world. So another development that happened in 1988, a gentleman by the name of Chuck Zimmerman, and I'll talk more about Chuck later, he left his employment with a local hop dealer here and became a consultant for Pfizer. Yes, that Pfizer, the pharmaceutical company that also happened to own a hop extract plant in Sidney, Nebraska. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to Sidney, Nebraska. It's not the end of the world, but you can see it from there. It's out in the middle of nowhere. And what they did is they took a safflower oil extraction plant, Pfizer did, and converted it to a hop extract plant. And it was really done to kind of recapture some of the research and development technology that they had developed in their pharmaceutical company and applied that to hop extract, creating specialty products with different attributes for brewers. Now, we saw an opportunity because Chuck's job was to find a source of alpha hops, late maturing alpha hops. My family, the Peralt family, and the Smith family three families that are still growing hops and have been for many generations here in the valley, saw this as an opportunity to find a home for our alpha hops outside of the traditional dealer network. Now, this strategic alliance that we formed with Pfizer required that we not only grow the hops, but also store the hops and later on pelletize the hops before shipping them off to Sydney. And so we went to the bank, we borrowed some money, we bought a warehouse down in Sunnyside, and we subsequently borrowed money to build a pellet plant. Now, Chuck, at the same time, Chuck Zimmerman, was also involved with private hop breeding. Hop breeding is a very complex thing. It's a generational thing. It takes a long time. And Chuck wanted to see his private breeding continue. So he worked with us to secure this germplasm he had been working on. And we've taken that program back since 1989. And we've developed some interesting new hop varieties from that germplasm. Now, in hindsight, growers securing access to a warehouse and a pellet plant was a little bit like giving a group of teenagers a case of beer and your car keys. We were very production driven. We were very proud of what we grew. We had a good handle on what it cost, and we were not going to sell unless we got the price that we wanted. And the result of that was, by ignoring the market, the result was, made the banks pretty nervous. They lent us cash to build these facilities, and they wanted to get paid back in cash instead of hop extract or hop products. So it dawned on us, this lesson that we learned from AB, where we'd been able to sit down and open up this two-way communication with them, we had forgotten that lesson. We had figured we grew these hops, there's got to be a market for it. In reality, what we should have been asking is, brewer customer, what do you want us to grow? What varieties and what volume? So we quickly relearned that lesson, and we started building a dialogue with our brewer customers. And not only did we learn the volumes and the varieties that they wanted, we also learned what they wanted in terms of quality. We also learned what they wanted in terms of sustainability. And we studied what they needed in terms of customer service to help them make great beer. So we developed all these systems over the years, taking that transparency, taking that communication, and turning it into concrete programs, concrete systems, all up and down the supply chain, designed to help our customers make great beer. And our business grew. And as Barbara mentioned, we're now the largest hop company in North America. Now, that was never on our radar, to be the largest. We didn't think of that. That's not what we were about. What we were about was bringing a degree of transparency to the industry, and also recognizing that the two most important parts of the hop supply chain are growers and the brewers. That's all we wanted. We wanted to do the right things for the right reasons, and the business grew. And as Barbara mentioned, we're the largest in North America. We handled a little better than a third of the U.S. crop last year. Those three original owners of Yakima Chief, the Peralt family, my family, and the Smith family, have been joined by 12 other grower owners sprinkled throughout the Pacific Northwest. And we are driven by a mission to connect family hop farms with the world's finest brewers. 30 years ago, it was rare for brewers to even visit hop farms. It just didn't happen. And now, every September, 300 or 400 or 500 brewers descend upon Yakima. And they're here to do one thing. They want to sniff and smell the hops and pick the hops that they want to go into the beer they're going to be brewing the next calendar year. So this transparency that was virtually non-existent is now the norm, and it's required us to design these new systems. And let me just share a couple of them with you. One of them that we developed a couple of years ago was this app for our brewer customers. So as they're rubbing and sniffing these beers, they got this app where they can kind of put down in their app their notes. And on the other side, we have a grower portal where growers are able to log on to that and in almost real time see the comments that customers are making about their hops. I'll tell you a quick story. I had one of our sales guys come to me a couple years ago when we started this. He says, Steve, I need you to read this comment that a brewer put on these hops. And I'm paraphrasing, but the brewer said something like, these hops smell like my cat ate all my weed and then peed on my Christmas tree. I said, you know, that's transparency. Sometimes you hear comments you don't want to hear. And the salesman says, no, you don't understand. That's his way of saying he wants every pound of that lot. Craft brewers are weird. They really are. And you need to be a little bit weird with them. And, you know, but really what craft brewers are, they're artists. They're always looking for a new color on that palette to create something new. And that's where our breeding program has come in. There's varieties that exist now that didn't exist even 10 years ago. And these brewers who are artists take these varieties and develop these beers with these unique flavors and aromas. And it really turns on their customers. Another thing we do is when we develop a new variety, we have what we call our Footprints program. And that program really involves hiring this army of interns that go into these hop yards. And they walk through them and they're looking for off types because that's something that's important to our customers to have purity in our hop varieties. The other thing they're looking for are males. There's probably a few ladies in the audience that will tell you human males are absolutely worthless, except maybe for breeding purposes. It's the same thing in hops. You don't want males in your hop yards because they create seed. And seed creates weight without any value to the brewer. So that's what these interns are looking at in the Footprints program, are looking for male hops so they can mark them with their GPS and rogue them out. We have a green sheet program. It's another example of something we have. And that's really a grower forum where we get growers together. We talk about reducing synthetic pesticide usage. We've got a group of growers right now who are working hard to identify their carbon and water footprints. And if we can measure it, we can develop strategies to improve it. That's the whole idea behind that. We have growers working on that right now. And really, I credit a new generation of beer drinkers as really providing the inspiration for us to do things we're doing to create transparency in the hop industry. As my wife's here, she'll attest to, when I travel, I like to go to the local craft breweries. And you go into these craft breweries and you always see this group of young people sitting in the corner. And they've got their taster flight. And I think it's a small measure of our success. If you sit close enough, you'll hear them talking about the different hop varieties in that beer. And in some cases, they're even talking about who the grower was that grew them. You know, and they may not know them, but they know who that grower is. And it goes beyond that. This younger generation of beer drinkers, they want to know, were those hops, were those raw materials that are going into my beer, were they grown with attention to being friendly to the planet? They want to know that all the people in the supply chain that help produce those hops, from the farm workers to the production workers in our business, to the transportation folks getting those hops to the brew kettles, were they treated fairly? And they want to know, do all the companies, do the growers, the family farms, does Yakima Chief, the transportation companies, Are they doing things to help make their communities healthier places to live, to work, and to play? Me, us baby boomers, does it taste good? What does it cost? That's all we want to know about beer. This younger generation is inspirational in that way and drives a lot of the things that we do. Our key objective at Yakima Chief, one of our key objectives, is to not only tell the story of our growers, but to make sure it's a story worth telling. And so we've committed a lot of resources to developing transparency all up and down the supply chain with the idea of creating accountability for ourselves and our growers, and in turn creating value for our brewer customers. I'd like to leave you with a thought, and the thought is transparency creates trust. And trust is the foundation for building value in any relationship. And that means in your business, that means in your organization, that means in your personal relationships as well. And as you go out and celebrate this holiday season or beyond, first and foremost, be safe. But if you happen to hoist a pint of beer in celebration, think of us. Chances are the hops that are in that beer, we either grew or processed in our company, and now you know the story behind the hops. Thanks for your attention tonight.